Hello, I'm Jonathan Beasley, and I have the opportunity to teach Sunday school this week. We've missed a couple of weeks due to our quarantine, and it looks like we're going to continue to miss a few weeks, but Lord willing, this will pass and we'll move on and be something we tell our grandkids. This will be our uphill in the snow moment for this generation. But thank you for watching today, and the title of our lesson this week is The Suffering Servant. And it'll be taken from Mark chapter 14. So if you want to go ahead and be flipping over there, Mark chapter 14. I do want to wish everyone well. Hope everyone stays healthy. I do ask that you comply with our governor's new order and stay at home. My goodness, you have no business at Walmart. So stay at home. And the sooner we can get through with this, the sooner we'll be done, as my daddy used to say. So again, take care of yourself, wash your hands, and stay at home if you can. But we'll be looking today, the suffering servant, Mark chapter 14. Very big change of pace than what we have been doing in Sunday school. Last month we were in Jeremiah. This month we will be in the New Testament. And we're leading up to the crucifixion of Christ. Next week will be Easter. And this lesson we'll be talking about the betrayal of Christ and the beginning of his betrayals by Judas. Will lead up. We won't quite get to the betrayal by Peter, but then we will also have him arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane. Now, suffering is not something that we want. It's something we hope to avoid. It's something we hope to keep our loved ones away from. But unfortunately, suffering is a fact of life. And there's the mental anguish. Jesus is going to suffer the mental anguish. He's going to suffer an emotional anguish. He's going to suffer a spiritual anguish. And of course, we know as he leads to the cross, he's going to suffer a physical anguish. We can always say when we see someone that's suffering, we understand. But the simple fact is, we don't know. Until you've been there and everyone's circumstances are different, you just don't know. You want to try to know, you think you know, but there's no way for me to know what you're going through. And then there's a lot of people right now going through a lot of things. We've got the fear of a pandemic. We've got some facing the loss of jobs, some facing loss of income. There's a lot of unknowns. But right now we want to look at Christ suffered in order to accomplish God's will. And I'm going to read Mark chapter 14, verses 32 through 42. Those of y'all that's been in my Sunday school class know that I normally have someone read this for me, and I interrupt a whole lot. So I guess I'll have the opportunity to interrupt myself as I read this. Mark chapter 14, beginning in verse 32. And the Bible says, "And they came to a place which was named Gethsemane. And he said to his disciples, Sit ye here, while I shall pray. And he taketh with him Peter, James, and John, and he began to be sore amazed and to be very heavy." Now, it's always important to get these stories out of Old English and get them into High-Togi English, as I like to say. So Jesus and his disciples have come to a garden, and he leaves a certain section of his disciples, the majority of them, at the entrance of the garden. This is a private enclosed garden. And he and Peter, James, and John, his core, go a little further. Okay? And he instructs them to stay here and to pray. 34, "And he said to them, My soul is exceedingly sorrowful unto death. Tarry ye here and watch." Now this is his inner circle, Peter, James, and John. And it says that he was amazed, and he becomes heavy, and his soul is sorrowful unto death. Now remember, we live in a time of uncertainty because we don't know. Jesus Christ was 100% man, 100% God at the exact same time. So he is all-knowing, even though he's in the form of a man. So Christ is aware, even though he's a man, of what's about to happen because he has perfect knowledge. And it says that his soul is sorrowful unto death because he knows what's coming. Not only the physical anguish, but the spiritual, emotional anguish that's coming. Now, we continue on in 35. "And he went forward a little way and fell on the ground and prayed that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him." Now remember, Christ in his all-knowing knows what is at hand. And remember that God is in control. There's nothing that has slipped up on him. Jesus was born that night in Bethlehem because it fit the plan. He is in this garden now because it fits the plan. But he's praying that if it be possible, what's imminent could pass. Christ was 100% God, and he is there to fulfill the will of his Father. But he's also 100% man, and he knows what's about to happen. And he said in his prayer, verse 36, Abba, Father. That is a term of intimacy, okay? None of us refer to our dads as dearest Father. We just don't. That's not how we speak to them. He is speaking in a way that shows an intimate relationship. He says, Abba, Father, all things are possible unto thee. Take away this cup from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but that thy will be done. Let me reword that. I changed that. Not thy will, nevertheless, what I will, but what thou wilt. What he's saying is, and again, we don't speak that way. What he's saying is, if it's possible, let's change the plan. But if it's not possible, we're not going to do what I want to do. We're going to do what you want to do. Remember, Christ came to fulfill a prophecy, a plan that was set in place before the foundations of the earth. There was a plan for me and you to be saved. Jesus Christ is the plan. He was the sacrifice. He's aware of it, and he's there fulfilling the plan. And he's prayed that. If it's possible, let's change the plan, but if not, I'm here to fulfill the plan. 37. And he cometh and findeth them sleeping, and saith unto Peter, Simon, sleepest thou? Couldest thou not watch 1 hour? Watch ye and pray, lest ye enter into temptation. The spirit is ready, but the flesh is weak. Jesus comes back from his prayer. Remember, he's visibly shaken. And he comes back, and Peter, James, and John, his inner circle, they're asleep. I think all of us can realize there's times in our life that things are very important to us, but they don't seem quite as important to someone else. Christ knows what is coming. These three gentlemen have no idea what's coming. Jesus has referred to things a lot leading up to his crucifixion. They haven't understood it. We have the privilege of looking back in time and seeing. They did not. So they're here in the night. It's been all day. They're tired. And he says, stay here and pray. And their eyes got a little sticky. And they went to sleep. And he admonishes them for it. And he tells them, Peter specifically, maybe because Peter is about to fall into temptation himself, but quite possibly because Peter is the leader of the group. I don't think they ever had a show of hands who elects Peter to be the leader. He just assumed it and they fell in line. But Jesus tells him to be aware. Verse 39, and again he went and prayed and spake the same words. And he returned, he found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. Neither wist they want to answer him. So it happened again. You know what? If you ever get sleepy and you ever get to that point you can't stay awake, you're in trouble. You can't overcome it. The Sandman shows up and there's not much you can do to overcome him then. 41, and he cometh the third time and he said to them, sleep on now and take your rest. It is enough. The hour is come. Behold, the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of the sinners. Rise up, let us go. Lo, he that betrayeth me is at hand. So, Christ suffered in order to accomplish God's will. He had the full knowledge of what was coming. He had the full knowledge that one that had been with him for these years would betray him. Betrayal is a stinging and hurting action. And it hurt. And he understood what was coming because of it. Let's move on and let's look at Christ suffered because his friends betrayed and abandoned him. We're going to look at verses 43 through 52. Verse 43. And immediately while he spake, cometh Judas, one of the 12, and with him a great multitude with swords and staves from the chief priests and the scribes and the elders. And he that betrayed him was given them a token, saying, whomsoever I shall kiss, that same is he, take him and lead him away safely. And as soon as he was come, he goeth straightway to him, and he saith, Master, Master, and kissed him. Now, to get a complete picture of what's going on, you need to read the other Gospels. John and Luke in particular, to put all this together. But Jesus arises with Peter, James, and John, and immediately Judas comes. And that's his sign to the chief priest that I will give him a kiss on the cheek. That sign, that kiss on the cheek, would be like a handshake today. It was a sign of a greeting, and he called him master or rabbi, teacher. And when he came to him, kissed him on the cheek, and that was to identify this is Jesus. And that's what he did. Verse 46, and they laid their hands on him and took him away. And one of them that stood by drew a sword and smote a servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. And Jesus answered and said to him, Are you come out against me as a thief with swords and with staves to take me? I was daily with you in the temple teaching, and ye took me not, but the scriptures must be fulfilled. And they all forsook him and fled. Now, Jesus is aware of what's going on, and he is aware of the suffering that is coming. And he was in anguish over that. Now he's betrayed by his closest friends, his closest confidants, the people that knew him the best, the people that spent the most time with him. And it says they've all fled. They're gone. They left out of fear. Now, it's easy to throw stones here of what these men should have done, what they could have done, what would have happened if they did something different. But the truth is, it was all part of the plan. Jesus was aware. Now, before we beat up Peter too bad, he's unnamed here in Mark, but we know that he's the one that drew the sword. Peter at that instant was ready to die. He was ready to fight. He was ready to die. Okay? We don't need to beat up on Peter for his coming actions. Peter was a man of action, but he froze in time. Okay? And we need to be very careful anytime we say what we will or won't do in the future. Because the truth is, until we're in that situation, it's hard to know what we will or will not do. We'd like to think this is what I would do. And we need to prepare ourselves mentally for such a test. But all we can do is begin to prepare ourselves. I've told my Sunday school class this a long time ago at the University of Alabama with their football program. They were really big into some mental things, and you were supposed to visualize what you were going to do. And if this play, what were you supposed to do? And if the defense sat this way, you were supposed to do this. And you were supposed to visualize and mentally prepare yourselves for that. We can do those exercises, and we can try to prepare ourselves. And I think Peter probably had. He was instinctive, and his instinct here was to pull a sword and cut a man's ear off. He was ready to fight. It's the things we're not prepared for that get us in trouble. All right. Now, let's move on here. Jesus did admonish those people when they came, and they took him with they came with swords and clubs, and he did tell them, he said, I've been in the temple in public with you, and you've seen me and I've seen you, and you didn't say a word. You let me go. And now you come in the night to take me. Well, there's a lot of reasons they did that. Jesus was very popular at the time. He had went about the people, and he had been with the people. They had seen him, they had touched him, they'd handled him, they'd listened to him, they'd seen the miracles he performed. There's no way, politically, socially, that these men could carry out their plan in the broad daylight. There's no way the people would have allowed them to have arrested Jesus and had a mock trial in the daylight. So they had to do it in the dark. And that's what they've done here. We'll continue on. And we'll look at Christ suffered because the world hates the truth. We'll look at Mark chapter 14 still. We're going to look at 53 through 65. And they led Jesus away to the high priest, and with him were assembled all the chief priests and the elders of the scribes. And Peter followed him afar off, even in the palace with the high priest, and he sat with the servants and warmed himself at the fire. And the chief priest and all the council sought for witnesses against Jesus to put him to death, and found none. For many bare false witness against him, but their witnesses agreed not together. And there rose a certain, and bare false witness against Christ, saying, and we heard him say, I will destroy the temple that is made with hands, and within 3 days I will build another made without hands. But neither so did their witnesses agree together. This is what's happening. They pulled together some people to witness against Christ. Well, lo and behold, they couldn't get their story straight. Okay? It's hard when you tell a lot of lies to keep your lies straight, and we have to have a lot of liars to tell a lot of lies. It's hard to keep them together. And that's what's happening. They couldn't keep their story straight. But you know what? If you're not worried about the truth, you're not worried about keeping the story straight. And the high priest and the scribes, they're not worried about the truth here. And they move on. Verse 60, and the high priest stood up in the midst, and he asked Jesus, saying, Answerest thou nothing? What is it which these witnesses against thee? But he held his peace. So he said, why aren't you answering them? And Jesus didn't say anything. And he answered nothing. Again, the high priest asked him, and he said unto him, Art thou the Christ, the Son of the Blessed? And Jesus said, I am, and you shall see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power, coming in the clouds of heaven. And the high priest rent his clothes, and he said, What need we of any further witnesses? You have heard the blasphemy. What think ye? And they all condemned him to be guilty of death. So, here we are. Jesus suffered because he knew what was coming. He suffered because the plan of salvation involved his suffering and death. He realized it. He knew it. He was aware of what was happening. He suffered because he was abandoned by his friends. And now he suffers because the world hates the truth. The world didn't love Christ because he was the truth. The world will not love us as Christians because we have affiliated ourselves with Christ and we're called Christians. We need to prepare for these things. Christ warned us of these things. He warns his disciples of these things. But you know what? Christ tells us here, he said, you'll see me at the right hand of power and you'll see me coming in the clouds. Jesus has already told them, and he's told us, that there's a victory coming. We have uncertainty now. We have fear. We have things to be afraid of. But he said, we can take confidence and assurance in this, that through him, we shall have a victory. Thank you for watching this morning. I appreciate you being with us. And when we can, we'll all get back together in High Togi at Mt.Harmony Free Will Baptist Church. Be safe and be well. Thank you.